Welcome, everyone, to the first episode of Decisions That Count. This is a podcast where we unravel the mysteries of decision fatigue and discover how it affects everything from your gaming skills to your career choices. Whether you're an entrepreneur, an athlete, a student, professional, or just someone striving for peak performance, this podcast is for you. We're here to equip you with the knowledge and tools to overcome mental overload and make decisions that truly count. I'm Michelle, a mum, a marketer, and a self-proclaimed self-optimizer who knows firsthand the challenges of juggling multiple roles and making countless decisions every single day. And that's exactly why I'm really fascinated by the topic.
My name is Dr. Shawn Watson, and I'm a neuroscientist and an entrepreneur. And I've been fascinated with how our brains make decisions. My interest really started with what was happening in my own life. I noticed that by the end of the day, I was totally burnt out, completely exhausted and absent at home. I was turning into a zombie at night. I knew it wasn't chronic fatigue, stress, or maybe even depression because the next morning I would wake up and feel completely revitalized. On introspection and actually diving into the literature, I came across a condition known as decision fatigue, and I realized that I was actually becoming overwhelmed with decisions. And there's no way that I'm alone in this. I was shocked that actually no one was already talking about this condition. And this is what we hope to talk about in this podcast.
Now, I know what you're thinking. A neuroscientist, this is going to be way over my head. Basically, that's why I'm here. But trust me, Shawn has got a knack for explaining complex topics in a way that everyone will understand.
So don't worry, the podcast is going to be very engaging, relatable, and most importantly, actionable. So buckle up and get ready for a fascinating journey because we're going to really dive into the world of decision fatigue. Let's get started. So in this first episode, we're going to be diving deep into the core concept of decision fatigue. We'll uncover what it is, how it affects your brain, and why it matters more than you might think. And the best part, I get to share all my nerdy knowledge with you and have a lot of fun at the same time.
Let's get into this, Shawn. I think first question is, can you explain decision fatigue in a way that everyone can understand? Like, imagine if you were explaining this to your grandma.
Sure. Tough ask. I think where to start is what it's not. So decision fatigue is not mental fatigue. So first off, we need to make that clear that it's not when you feel tired or that sense of fatigue when you need a cup of coffee or, an energy drink. So decision fatigue and mental fatigue are very different. Decision fatigue, by definition, is when the quality of your decisions begins to decline over long sessions of decision making or in situations of high stress or anxiety. So there's no real timing of when decision fatigue can happen. It can happen very quickly if you're very stressed out or anxious, or it can happen over the course of a day. So by 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, after all of those decisions that you've made that day, you may start to experience it.
And so what does it feel like?
Pretty individual or personal to what the person feels, and also to the task at hand. So what you're doing, whether in the office or playing sport. So for myself, for example, I find that I start to make far more impulsive decisions. So I make more reflexive decisions rather than reflective. I'm not really thinking about the decisions I'm making. I'm more relying on heuristics or shortcuts to make a choice. And this is especially obvious in my life for later in the day, where I make these knee-jerk decisions. In an athlete, though, it may be quite different. So if you're a golfer, a tennis player, whatever, you may notice decision fatigue, and actually you're relying on more safer decisions in your sport. So for a tennis player near the end of the match, they may start actually making swings that they're the most comfortable with rather than what's most appropriate to the situation that they're in.
Let's talk a bit more about some more real world examples. So, when I come home from work and someone asks me, when the kids say, "Mum, what are we having for dinner?" And I cannot think straight. Like, I just don't know how to answer that question. Is that decision fatigue, or is it mental fatigue, or am I just physically fatigued? What is that decision fatigue?
It certainly could be. And this is the crazy part, I think, for me is just like as a neuroscientist, there's very few occasions where there's a new condition that kind of comes out that we haven't known about for a long time. So like we know a lot like dementia and Alzheimer's and these different challenges in neuroscience. Decision fatigue is so fascinating because it's actually probably a consequence of modern society. It's because we're making so many decisions now than we ever were in the past. So coming home from a long day of work and feeling that frustration or fatigue, it probably is decision fatigue. So decision fatigue can have kind of two primary consequences, or what we know about. So the first is actually decision avoidance. So this is actually when you say, I don't want to make this decision anymore, right? And you kind of say no decisions at all. This could actually be kind of a foundation for procrastination. So for me, I notice this when I leave an email in my inbox and I'm like, I'll deal with that tomorrow. I don't want to deal with it right now. So I'm avoiding decisions entirely. And when you come home from a long day of work, that could be, when your kids ask what's to eat or what can we have, you may try to avoid those decisions.
If it's be fair, I think my husband avoids them more than anything. It's like I say to him, what do you want for dinner? And he'll be like, you decide. It's like, I can't think about it. Are there any other alternatives to that?
Sure. Yeah. Well, first off, if we really think about like the decision avoidance, again, what's remarkable to me is we're not really thinking of the implications of that. So by not making a decision, quite often you're giving that decision to someone else. So maybe it's as benign as yes, your husband now doesn't have a choice in where he goes to eat that day or what restaurant you're going to. But it can have other meaningful, impacts in our life because by not making a decision, we're letting someone or a situation choose for us. And the second part of decision fatigue, so that's the decision avoidance part. The other one, consequence, is a bit more sinister, and this is kind of what we call default decision making. So that example of that tennis player making a safe swing. This is when your brain actually says, you know what, I'm not going to let you make any more decisions. I'm going to make an unconscious decision on your behalf. And when your brain does that, quite often it'll rely on what it thinks or perceives to be the safest decision or one that it's most used to, which again, quite often isn't the most appropriate to the situation at hand. And this one's interesting to me because it's something that's happening that we're not even aware of.
So if it's default decision-making, could it also be the easiest option? So for example, let's take the coming home from work and wanting something to eat. I'm just going to stick a frozen pizza in the oven, or I'm just going to reorder the same order that's saved in my food delivery app because I just want to default. I don't want to have to make the decision. It's almost definitely not going to be the healthiest option. Is that default decision making?
It certainly could be. Yeah. I mean, when you think about a long day of work, you're coming home, and you can default to a restaurant and a menu that that is safe, that the kids are going to, they're going to like the food that you order. And so there's not very many decisions to make. You already know what you're doing, right? Versus looking at a new restaurant, you're unsure, you need to decide on the menu. So no, you'll probably default to those simpler decisions. Yeah. And it's as benign as that, as to, work has been done from judges. So in the judicial system, we think that it's of course, it's run by people, so there are always inherent flaws, but we've never really considered decision fatigue. And a few studies have come out in the last kind of decade showing that even judges can suffer from this default decision making. But in their position, it's with parole hearings. So when prisoners come forward and they're looking to go on to parole, they're actually far more likely to get parole in the morning than the afternoon. Wow. Why? Because these judges were going through default decision making, which in their situation, the safe decision is to keep people in prison rather than release them into the community. So rates of parole acceptance are actually quite dramatically different depending on the time of day.
You keep saying the safe decision, like it's not the easiest decision. Like, can you just help define that a little bit more? Why is it the safe decision?
Yeah, great question. Because safe doesn't mean safe for everyone. It could just mean safe for you. It's what your brain has said, you know what, I've done this in the past and it's worked, right? Or I've taken this shortcut before. It's a heuristic. I've done this before. But safe could also be in a situation of like danger. So soldiers in combat, as example, and studies have been done in this too, may suffer decision fatigue very rapidly when they're in theater. And so if a soldier sees somebody downrange and they're unsure if it's a friend or a foe, but the soldier's suffering from decision fatigue, they may default to the safest decision. And in their situation, the safest decision may be to pull the trigger. Even if it's inappropriate to do so, they haven't correctly identified who's down there, but it's an unconscious decision that's happening. Wow.
And so there have been studies done on this in the military? Yeah,
I mean, we've called it different things. And what's interesting about this topic is it's still kind of just starting in the field. So we used to call it by a completely different name, a few decades ago. It was a psychological term that we called ego depletion. It's come quite a long way since then. So lots more evidence is coming out from soldiers to judges to cancer screening. So when should you go see a doctor? Morning or afternoon? You already know the answer.
Well, now I'm going to say morning, right?
Absolutely. So a doctor's decision-making changes if he or she has decision fatigue as well.
Yeah. And has this condition always been around? Or is this something that's new? I've never heard people talk about this in this way before.
Yeah, and this is, a big reason why I want to do this podcast is because this is something that is very new, and it's a consequence of our society. So decades ago, your average person was making hundreds of decisions a day. Now, because of society and the culture we live in globally, the average person is making something like 35,000 decisions a day.
Wait, hang on. How is that even possible? 35,000 decisions a day.
It's crazy. We're making hundreds of decisions about food. But for me, you got to really look at your life. And I notice that when I wake up in the morning, I'll go on social media, I'll scroll Reddit or whatever. Before I even get out of bed, just from scrolling for a few or 15 minutes, say, every piece of content on my phone is a decision of whether or not I will consume it. So I'm probably making hundreds of decisions before I even get out of bed. So the numbers add up rapidly. And simply put, I don't think our brain is designed, it's not designed to make this many decisions. And there has to be consequences to it. And this is decision fatigue.
And is this because of the world that we live in? The technology, the demands, how much we're trying to do and achieve? Is this a result of that?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it absolutely is everything we're doing in life is getting faster. Productivity is skyrocketing, even with AI. Not to go into a different topic. Yeah. AI is making things so much quicker, but it's actually causing us to make more decisions faster. What used to take us at work a couple days, now we can get answers in a couple minutes, but we still need to make a decision about what to do with those answers. So it just keeps accelerating the number of decisions that we're making. And so decision fatigue at large, certainly on this podcast that we're starting now, but when you look at social media, popular science, and academic work, this is taking off the topic because it's going to be probably one of the most impactful cognitive disablers of our time, of our generation.
And I think there's we're seeing a lot of conversation happening about what is the impact of all of this technology? What is the impact on the brain that hasn't yet evolved to be able to consume the sheer volume that we are either consciously or unconsciously consuming? We
have done a lot of work, but it tends to be on the psychology. So how does social media affecting our kids? A hot topic that we're trying to understand as a society and as a people. But we haven't really started talking about what does it do to the physiology of our brain, kind of the nuts and bolts, the foundation of the organ. What's changing there? And this is where decision fatigue sits. It's a physiological consequence of society. It's not a psychological consideration. Obviously, there's some intertwining between the two. But that's why it's so fascinating to me as a physiologist, is because it has these remarkable changes in the brain.
Wow. Okay. So this isn't just theoretical, that something is actually happening in the brain to cause this.
Yeah, we don't know exactly what it is yet. And to be frank, neuroscience is one of the slowest science. It takes a long time to develop it. And so it'll probably be a number of years before we get there. But there's animal models or cell models that we're looking at now for it. We're starting to elucidate some of the underpinnings of it. So we're starting to get a good theory of what may be causing decision fatigue. So it's definitely starting. It's not by any means a complete science yet, though.
Okay, so what is happening in the brain?
So the leading theory right now that I prescribe to, or I think is the most accurate, is related to glutamate accumulation in the synapse. So let's talk about what that means. So glutamate is one of the most common neurotransmitters in the brain. So if you have two neurons or two brain cells talking to one another, you have an electrical signal coming down. That electrical signal is turned into a chemical signal, a neurotransmitter that crosses the synapse. And then that goes on into another electrical signal, and the message continues on. So when we make a decision, that's what happens through the synapse, is this communication. Now, glutamate being one of the most common neurotransmitters, there can actually start to be a buildup of glutamate if the synapse is used again and again and again. And so the theory is that buildup of glutamate will actually change the signal to noise ratio, because that synapse starts to get noisy because the glutamate is sticking around. And when that happens, actually, that signal will no longer be able to go through. So, I mean, the simplest of terms, going back to explaining it to my grandma, basically the communication pathway becomes disrupted. There's a buildup of waste, you could call it, in the synapse. And when that happens, your brain still wants to make a decision. So it'll actually go to a network or a path that is more robust, that can handle all of that kind of information overload. And that's when you resort back to your safe or your default decisions, is probably when your brain doesn't have the capacity to make unique decisions anymore. So it goes back to what it's most comfortable with.
What do we do with that? Like how do we remove that?
Yeah, I mean, that's the active area of research. And that's the exciting area of research, because now we know that there's maybe something we can do about it. If the mechanism is truly that, and if we can identify that that's a condition, then hopefully we can find ways to help. There's one sure way to get rid of decision fatigue. And that's what kind of I spoke about earlier in the episode is go to bed. Have a good night's sleep, and all of that buildup of glutamate, neurotransmitters, waste, whatever you want to call it, completely disappears. So sleep is the best way to get rid of decision fatigue. It's very transient, so it builds up throughout the day, but then a good night's rest and you're back to where you were before.
What about taking a nap in the middle of the day?
Yeah, also can be effective. So, I mean, there's studies showing how kind of your brain can just clear itself out. It kind of washes itself out when you go to sleep. So a nap is another great thing to do. Interesting enough, just in my exploration of this topic, I got to chatting with a lot of people in esports, professional e-gamers, because professional video gamers actually are acutely aware of decision fatigue. And they see the consequences of their decision fatigue right away playing a video game. So the top tier athletes, actually, what they've trained themselves to do, because they'll play for 10 or 12 hours a day, is they'll go into this loud stadium and they're able to nap for 20 minutes between games. Yeah. It's remarkable, but it's their way to combat decision fatigue, because they tend not to drink any types of caffeine or other stimulants or energy drinks.
Despite what is on their table.
Yeah, and advertising is very different, of course. But when you talk about the pros, this is what they do, is they try to nap, because decision fatigue is for them, it's the difference between a win or a loss. Is a poor decision or a decision made on reflex is going to cost them the game. So this is what they've done actually in esports, these top tier athletes.
And if anyone has ever played any game ever, after a certain period, you're like, oh, why am I making that decision? Why did I put that block there in Tetris? Why did I go that way when I knew there was an alien, And you get that frustration, don't you? Where you're like, oh God, why am I making such stupid mistakes, stupid decisions?
You're right. And for gamers, there's a word for it. So they call it tilting.
Yeah.
So it's a throwback to the pinball days when you'd smack the pinball machine and it would say tilt, and then you lost the game. So video gamers, and actually poker players as well, they call it tilting, that emotional response to bad decision making. So, and then that causes them to make more bad decisions. I was fascinated that while decision fatigue was, a relatively new topic for me, there's certain industries and games and sports that they're acutely aware of this condition.
So how do we become more aware of this? Because I think, since working with you and talking about this more frequently, I am trying to become more aware of when am I suffering from physical fatigue, mental fatigue, and decision fatigue. How do you know the difference?
Quite often we incorrectly think we're suffering from mental fatigue, right? It's just feeling tired. But I think in reality, it's probably decision fatigue that's hitting us. Well, maybe I'll answer your question with your question. So busy household, like being a mom. And so you say it's very tiring and you're fatigued at the end of the day. In your home, decisions, what do you see in your household for decision making?
Oh, wow. Okay. So just to kind of clarify for the audience, I have got a full-time job. So I will have worked a full day, and then at home, I probably make 95% of the decisions for our household. And that will include everything from the meal plan, what we're eating, what the kids are eating for every meal, what's in their lunch boxes, what's the shopping list, what are we doing at the weekend, doing all of the kind of social planning for the family. When does the dog need to go to a vet's, which is this weekend? When does the aircon guy need to come? What if we're going to a kid's birthday party on Sunday, what gifts are we buying the kids whose birthday it is? Yeah. Those are just a handful, but it's pretty relentless when you're a mom and you're the kind of key decision maker for the household. So it's not just making the decisions, it's remembering and trying to be on top of all the decisions that you've got to make.
And I think it's a fantastic example, because when I started to look at decisions in my life, same with my wife. So my wife makes by far 99% of the decisions. And what I realized actually is she was definitely suffering from decision fatigue. She was exhausted by the decisions. And then looking at myself, I realized that I was totally offline, because when I came home from a long day of work and she's like, "What do you want to eat?" I would say, "You decide. I'm the nice guy. You decide what to make." But actually, by putting more decisions on her, right, you don't realize that that's probably what she was suffering from.
Yeah.
So I realized in just my own life and relationships that decision fatigue is affecting all of us, from a mom to at work. And more decisions sometimes aren't the answer. It's taking decisions off your spouse or your employee or your colleague or whoever. So it's something that's just prevalent in every aspect of life.
This is amazing. I think we need to do a whole episode on decision fatigue and the mental load of the house, because many women, many people talk about the mental load of the house, and that, whoever is the lead person who's managing that, it's always quite hard to communicate what that actually means. But I think when you start to kind of distill it down into the volume of decisions that you're making for the house, and it's like, we're not necessarily asking to split the physical load, it's to split the decision load, and actually asking your partner to make more decisions or take on some of the decisions can actually release a significant amount of the load.
Yeah. And I mean, for our viewers, this topic is so rich, and this is our first episode. We're going to go from moms and household decision making to top tier athletes, the F1 drivers, tennis players, esports athletes, to bankers, judges, doctors. It's such an exciting topic, because every aspect of life is going to be covered by it. So no, I think the next episode is going to be pretty exciting. We're going to have some great discussions with people from all walks of life. And I can almost guarantee you they suffer from decision fatigue.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I can't wait to get into it and just learn more about it as well. And as someone who is a self-optimizer, who is always looking at how I can unlock more of my potential, this could be a massive unlock here. This could be key to real growth and real change. Identifying something that could be holding me back.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I call myself a lazy optimizer. I always try to find the littlest change that has the most impact. And decision fatigue is definitely that for me. It's something that once you become cognizant of, it can really change your perspective about life, work, your relationships, kind of everything that you can think of.
I think that kind of makes me think about small things that you can do. And we've in the past, there's been a lot of discussion around kind of the paradox of choice, or the choice paradox. The fact that we now have too many choices, and that's what's causing a fatigue. And we see that from Steve Jobs, for example. He's absolutely famous for wearing the same thing every day. To remove that decision, to remove any decisions, especially first thing in the morning when your decision making is at its peak. So let's just talk a little bit more about the choice paradox, about how we can remove decisions, and also kind of the quality of your decisions throughout the day.
If we think of decisions, so it's not totally accurate, but if we say that you have X number of decisions a day, right? You have a full tank of gas, a full tank of decisions. Every decision you make is starting to deplete it. So by me, waking up in the morning and scrolling through socials, I'm giving up decisions that maybe later in the day are far more important to me or my career or my family. So if we start to just view decisions as a limited commodity, as something that is going to be used up as we make every decision, it really changes our perspective, or I think it should change our perspective. And I think that's one thing that I hope we cover in these episodes, in these podcasts, is helping people to become more aware of their decisions, that every decision they make counts.
The name of the podcast, Decisions That Count. So what you're saying...
I just thought of something too, actually. It would be fascinating if we chat about this, because there's the good and the bad, obviously, because from a marketeer perspective. So of course, you, Michelle, are a fantastic marketer. How you market to people should be different whether or not they suffer from decision fatigue.
Yeah.
right? So how I market to you in the morning is very different from during the evening, right? So I should be sending your ads your way in the evening about a really easy meal choice for your kids, right? Something that you're comfortable with. So maybe we'll cover that too, is how to be aware of that for what messages you see at what time of day.
Oh, I think we've got another episode in there for sure. Kind of decision fatigue and marketing.
That's all you.
Yeah. How to reach people. Okay, this is going to be good. But let's come back to kind of, okay, if we've got a finite number of quality decisions in us every day, what we want to do is optimize those in the morning. So we want to save big decisions, important decisions. We want to be making them first thing in the morning when we are fresh, alert, a bit more capable maybe of making a good decision. Is that correct?
Absolutely. So when you wake up from sleep, that's when you're going to make, or you're going to have the most high quality decisions, right or wrong. I mean, that's always an individual perspective, but that's going to be your highest quality decisions in the morning. First thing I think we can think of though is strategies to reduce mundane decisions, right? So we talked about meal planning, something like that, rather than going through menus and things like that. Or even just look at something like entertainment or Netflix. How many hours have you spent scrolling through Netflix, right? And kids, it's even worse. But like all of those decisions, if we can plan ahead for anything, it helps to reduce that load on us throughout the course of the day.
Is that also kind of like linked to habits and habit building? That if you creating habits that you're almost doing automatically, will that help reduce decision fatigue?
So I haven't read much literature about this. There's certainly been a lot of theories and discussions around this point. And I think the evidence is such that we have to date is that absolutely it would affect habits. So because habits, creating or breaking a habit is quite difficult. And if you're trying to do it at the end of a day, long work day, dealing with kids, and you're trying to break whatever habit that may be, or start going to the gym in the evening, and you're suffering from decision fatigue, it's going to be way harder for you because your brain is going to want to default to the safest or easiest decision, which could be staying on the couch, which could be, opening a bag of chips or whatever it is for you. Breaking or making habits will certainly be affected by decision fatigue. I think we'll have a whole episode just on that.
I would love to get into that. And I think the more that I've learned about decision fatigue, the more I'm realizing actually I've put things in place to reduce the number of decisions, particularly in the mornings. I know weeks ahead of time what I'm going to be doing with my exercise in the mornings. I get up at the same time every day. I've got a limited capsule wardrobe, so I wear the same 5-10 outfits for work. I have the same breakfast every single morning. I leave the house. And so it's just kind of creating those routines where it's like I'm not having to stand around in my kitchen thinking about, okay, what am I going to have for breakfast, or what am I going to wear today, or am I going to go out and exercise, or am I going to stay in bed? I don't have those, everything is on autopilot almost.
Perfect. Well, that opens up more decisions for you later in the day or during the day for decisions that matter, right? Decisions that count. And now you're going to have that capacity to make the best decisions you can by taking out a lot of those mundane ones. So a question for you, Michelle, which I've always been really interested in, is you're a marathon runner.
Yes.
Right. Do you think you suffer from decision fatigue for running? I ask that because I think it's fascinating. It's a physical sport, obviously, but I think it's actually more of a mental game than anything else to force your body to keep going. Do you think you ever get decision fatigue when you run?
I don't know. I think because it's still such like a new concept to me. Like I don't know how aware of that it is, but I think the more you think about it, you're constantly in a kind of battle with yourself, especially when you kind of hitting that 30-kilometer mark, and it's like you just want to give up, and it's one step at a time. Just keep going. I think if anything, it's making the decision up front as well. Like once I say I'm going to do something, I will do it. So if I'm going to go out on my own and run for 3 hours, I will go out and run for 3 hours.
So you're taking away the decision to quit.
Yeah. So it's not, I'm never going to go out and say, I'm just going to go for a run and see how far I go, because that's when decision fatigue would play a part in it, because you're like, you've got to keep deciding to keep going. Whereas with marathon training and marathon running, I will say I'm going to do that distance and I will do it. unless I'm injured or in a significant amount of pain. And even then, I would probably push past it and just get it done.
Interesting.
Not the answer you were looking for.
No, it's fascinating because I think in marathon running is you're making constant decisions of whether or not to quit or to stop.
Yeah.
And there's also a ton of strategy in marathon running as well. So it's just an extreme endurance sport for sure.
Yeah, I've never thought of it like that. And so I think that's something that I definitely want to think about. I'll be thinking about it now on Sunday when I'm running the half marathon to think, okay, do I actually want to quit? So tell us a personal story. Like, when have you suffered from decision fatigue?
Well, I've been suffering from it my whole life, I think. It's just more recently that I really realized the feeling, though. And for me, it's the most obvious when I get home from a long day of work. And so I have 2 young kids. They're 1 and 3. And after a long day of decisions, you just feel like a zombie. I'm completely burnt out. And it's because of all the decisions I made over the trajectory of the day. And I find it the most with kids, because I find that if one of my boys wants to go play a game or play soccer or whatever they ask me to do, I will default to the easiest decision with them, which tends to be like blocks in the living room, right? Not a scooter outside. And because I was really disappointed, I love physical activity, I love going outside, but then I found that I just defaulted to them, and that's when I became really aware of it, because it was a decision that I didn't like, but it was a decision that I defaulted to. So in my life, that's when I most obviously recognized the condition. And then once that popped up, I saw it more in my professional life. So the decisions I made late in the afternoon were more of a safer, less risky decision. My risk tolerance changed in the afternoon. And when you have your own company, that's a big deal. And it can dramatically change kind of the success and trajectory of everything. So it started, though, with my home life, actually.
Wow. And you've just sparked something in me as well, because I think we do the same. Definitely. Just when it comes to work life, you said something earlier on in the podcast, which was about procrastination. Oh God, it's like one of my biggest enemies. And I get so frustrated with myself that I'm like losing focus, or I'm procrastinating on something. Could this be because of decision fatigue?
Yeah, procrastination's an interesting one, because there's obviously a lot of psychology in procrastination as well. And I think maybe as a neuroscientist, I love to think like it's not my fault, it's my brain, right? So I just blame it on the physiology, not the psychology. But the reality is decision fatigue could certainly cause procrastination. You're avoiding decisions, right? You're avoiding, like I said, a good example is an inbox. You read the title, the subject, you have to make a decision, but you don't open it. Or you open it and then you click unread again. We've all probably been there, but it certainly plays a role in procrastination.
We've talked about a nap. Is there anything else that we can do? It's not always practical to have a nap in the middle of the day.
There's not too much out there, to be honest. So there's general things we know about, like overall physical health can improve your resilience. There's certain things like meditation, mindfulness we know can potentially play a role, even going outside and seeing some green space. There's this emerging field called cognitive motor dual tasking. So it's actually pairing cognitive loads with physical activity to try to build your executive functions, which may also play a role in building resilience to decision fatigue. So there's some things we can do to combat it or try to build resilience for it. Probably the best strategy to date is what you yourself do, is strategic planning to try to eliminate as many mundane decisions we can throughout the course of the day. Steve Jobs wearing the same clothes and things like that. But no, it's an active area of research, though. I mean, as a physiologist, again, this is where I'm fascinated, because if that target mechanism is accurate, then hopefully we can develop a solution for it.
Okay, so are there any supplements or any products out there that could potentially, if you're looking for a solution, that could potentially deliver that?
Nothing right now. So decision fatigue itself is such a new topic. There's no product on the market that can go for it, because this isn't about mental clarity, focus, memory, all of the brain health supplements you read today. It's very unrelated to decision fatigue in most cases, because pretty much every supplement now is about stimulants, like a type of energy to increase wakefulness.
Yeah, so I was just going to ask about energy drinks. Energy drinks are not curing decision fatigue or combating decision fatigue then?
No, I think they're hiding maybe some of the symptoms. I think energy drinks will make you make decisions quicker. but it's not necessarily the right decision. So it's speeding things up, but maybe in the wrong direction.
Yeah. Wow. Okay, that's interesting and a bit scary.
Yeah, I mean, you can think of caffeination as something that has a lot of research has been done in soldiers for this. And when you think of caffeine or energy drink, it allows a soldier to pull up their rifle and aim much quicker. So the whole process of drawing and firing is faster, and they're more accurate when they're on a stimulant or an energy drink or whatever you want to call it. But that doesn't change whether or not they should pull the trigger. That's decision fatigue, is whether or not they should pull the trigger. So it's two very different concepts, interrelated of course, but that decision is what fascinates me, is how that can change over time.
And so does the deterioration in your decision making, is that affected by stress or the size of the decision? You know, if you are a CEO and you are looking at a restructure and it's a big decision, you know, can that make decision fatigue happen quicker?
Absolutely. So the stress or anxiety related to that decision, or how big that decision is to you, certainly can change the speed that you get it from. So it could totally be a CEO who's making a decision for thousands of people, but also a mom making a decision for their child is, maybe arguably she may suffer decision fatigue faster because of the emotional connection and consequences of that decision. It's very stressful, right? And going back to talk about moms, right? Now times that by a whole day with your child. So I think moms are probably one of the groups who suffer from decision fatigue the most.
Yeah. Wow. Okay, that's crazy. And so, so if you're in a high stress environment, or if you're going into a busy day where you're going to have to make some very difficult decisions, how can you manage that?
So think ahead. So strategic planning is really important. If you can kind of, have the cleanest schedule possible leading up to those decisions. So don't scroll social, right? Don't go into any situation where you have to make a lot of decisions. Follow your habits, right? If you drive to work every day, do the same thing. Don't change that. Try to eliminate the number of decisions leading up to that presentation, that show, that whatever, that athletic event. You want to try to keep the cleanest schedule you can.
So I think athletes is just a really interesting cohort for this. Tell us a little bit about how decision fatigue could affect athletes.
So for athletes, it's quite interesting because decision fatigue can have a huge effect on gameplay, especially later in matches or whatnot, because an athlete may start to rely more upon default decision-making or heuristics, or doing what they're most comfortable with. So in esports, it's very obvious because they'll make a risk to reward ratio that is very off. In tennis, it could be a swing that they're most comfortable with, right? In F1 driver, could not taking a pass that they should have. So they defaulted to a safer decisions to stay behind the driver rather than take an opportunity to pass. So for athletes, it absolutely is a condition, and it's probably actually one of the last real frontiers to tackle for athletes. From a physical performance perspective, what we're seeing is in the top elite athletes, physically, they're all pretty similar now, right? There's only a few percentage changes maximum from a physical side of things. It's really on the mental side of things. And then we've talked about resilience and grit and things of that nature. But only recently are we talking about decision fatigue as being probably one of the most important disablers for athletes, especially as matches continue on.
Wow. I didn't even consider that for them. But of course, it makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, how many games are won and lost in the last 15 minutes, right? From an unforced error, a decision that was incorrect. So it's super impactful for athletes. And we're going to see it be a big part of every sport in the near future.
Okay, I can't wait to get into that.
We'll talk to a lot of athletes, I'm sure.
Oh, I hope
including
so.
yourself, by the way. Yes.
Yeah, definitely not at that level. But yeah, absolutely. I would love to get into that too. So this is a brand new podcast. We're both really excited about the topic of decision fatigue. I'm really excited to learn from you and kind of all of your knowledge in this space. What can our listeners expect?
Number one, I think my goal is to make the listeners kind of understand decision fatigue. So what is it? How is it affecting their life? Hopefully bring on a lot of guests from different walks of life and vocations that they can relate to, because the consequences of decision fatigue are immense in your own life and your happiness and your quality of life and everything. So I think yeah, the primary goal is just to make people aware of the condition. I think that would be the biggest and most important output from my side.
And I think for me, it's just being able to kind of understand a little bit more about the condition and what are the practical strategies that we can do to overcome it, and what is the impact of this for a normal life, you know, a normal person, maybe even a collective as well.
And science-wise, just to nerd it up a bit, it's such a cool topic because, again, it's so rare in neuroscience to come across a condition that we don't already know about. And I think decision fatigue is really this. It's a consequence of modern society. We haven't had to deal with this before as human beings. So from a neuroscientist side and you know, the nerd that I am, it's absolutely fascinating. And it's such an exciting topic to discuss.
I can't wait. I'm going to try and help translate the science bit in.
We'll get really nerdy on some episodes. Don't worry.
Okay. This is going to be cool. If anything goes over my head, I'm going to help bring it down for every man and woman. Okay. So yeah, I thank you so much. This is going to be exciting.
Super pumped for it. It's going to be great.
Yes. Shawn, this has been such an incredibly eye-opening conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us today.
Totally my pleasure. This is a super exciting topic, and I can't wait for our next episodes. And to all the listeners, please post below in the video. I'd love for this to be a journal club for my fellow scientists out there. If there's other studies or things that I should be looking at, please post it. And we'll try to answer any questions as well in the next videos. So feel free to post below or connect with us on LinkedIn or any of the socials. So looking forward to seeing everybody again soon.
Listeners, we hope you're feeling really inspired to take control of your mental energy and make decisions that truly count. If you enjoyed this episode, please hit that subscribe button and leave us a review. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Thanks for tuning in to Decisions That Count. We'll catch you in the next episode.